while. Welcome, thank you for coming on this warm day, right? I'm like, didn't even need a jacket. It was like -2 or something. Okay, so Josiah, my 1-year-old boy, he is utterly addicted to candy. Okay, so we take advantage of that. Sometimes we just like get him to do things like take photos if we give him candy. But for the most part, we try to really restrict him from it, right? Because it's not that great for him. I don't want him to be addicted to it. But there was one day we were walking through Shoppers Drug Mart, and then we were walking through the candy aisle, and then he just like ran up to it. And he was so happy. He was like laughing and like whatever. Like he's just so happy about it. And then so me and Chris, we felt bad, and so we're like, okay, fine. We'll get you candy. But this time around, we decided to give him, tiny kid, and you're looking at the candy shelves, and it feels like it goes down forever, and it's up to the ceiling, right? And it's just like, whoa, I can choose anything, right? And me and Chris were like, go ahead, today you choose. And even though he's 1 and probably doesn't understand us, he looked at me as if it's just like, okay, Dad, I'm ready, right? I'll make you proud. And then off he went. So I was watching him as a proud father, going to live his destiny, right? And then I see him beeline it to the bottom shelf. And then he picks up one confidently, and without even second guessing. I'm like, that's my son, confident, he knows what he wants. And then he turns around with it, and my heart drops. Because there's so many things to pick from, right? There's Wonder Bars, there's Kit Kats, Haribo gummies.
Out of all the possible options, what did he choose? Candy corn, right? A big plastic case of candy corn. That's literally and objectively the worst candy out there, right below like cherry chocolates and jujubes, and for me, Twizzlers. I think those are gross. And it's one of those candies where you see and it makes you wonder, why are they still even making this, right? And I haven't been a father for very long, but from that was by far the most disappointing moment of fatherhood. And it's like, where did we go wrong with our parenting? It goes without saying that since then, Josiah lost all freedom to choose anything. For Josiah, I can take away his freedoms when he does stupid things. But for us non-babies, we do have the freedom to choose. And it's more than just choosing candies. We have the freedom to choose what our lives are going to be about, right? What the core of our being is focused on. And if it's not intentional or careful, if we're not careful about it, we'll end up with a candy corn equivalent of a life, and that is just terrible. And so it matters. We want to use our freedom to choose worthy things. So our focus today is this question: what is the most important choice we will ever make? And from our Bible passage, we see that the biggest choice that we can make is about what kingdom we want to be a part of, what kingdom we want. And I believe that everybody has 2 choices. Okay, we can commit to an easy counterfeit kingdom, or we could commit to a costly, lasting kingdom. This is our 3rd and final sermon of our Temptation of Jesus series. And the first one, where David K. was preaching, he went through the temptation of the physical needs of the body, right? Last week, Enoch talked about the second one, which is the security of the mind. And today, we're talking about the heart, okay? We're talking about the core of what Jesus was really about. And as we examine Jesus' process of fighting against the temptation of the heart, we hope to learn something as we're faced with the same temptation. Let's read the Bible passage for today. Matthew 4:8-10. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. Jesus said to him, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. From this passage, we will learn about our most important choice, starting with our first point. We could commit to an easy counterfeit kingdom.
So for those who don't know, counterfeit just pretty much means fake, okay? Back in high school, the most important thing to me by far was to try to fit in with the cool group, okay? Back in Vancouver, is this disgusting word, they were called the Nammers, and it's just like, ew, right? Okay, but they were really cool back then, and their families were rich. And I think it's common knowledge that they were rich because, shady and illegal means. But with a lot of money, they had a certain look, okay? All the clothes they wore was like $100 plus. They had to look a certain way, wear certain brands. My family, on the other hand, we qualified for welfare programs, right? Where we were actually poor, right? And I mean, I went to shop at Value Village, not because it's trendy or saving the earth or whatever. No, it's like, I actually need clothes, and this is how I'm gonna get clothes, right? And so we were actually poor, and so I had a dilemma, okay? So the dilemma was, how can I fit in with this cool group of nice clothes people when I am poor? And so a quick brainstorm, you can probably think some probably pretty good options, right? I can work hard and make money. I can choose a better group of friends that is not so focused on superficial things. No, I chose to go on eBay and buy fake clothes, okay? So specifically, I remember there was a G-Star Raw winter jacket that was fake, and that was kind of the brand that everyone was wearing back then. And I was so excited when I got it, because what did that mean? That mean I was in. I'm finally in. There's no cons to this. I have bamboozled and tricked all these people into thinking that I'm not poor, right? But throughout the months, the jacket would fail me over and over and over again. So from everything from every now and then, it's little white fluffs coming out, or the threading patterns would start coming off, and I have to pull it, and when I pull it, it just goes up higher, and I'm like, oh man. The zipper is one of those ones that's thick, and if it's not completely straight, it won't zip. Right? It's just that's kind of annoying. But the worst of all, during the winters, I was so cold, all the time, right? The jacket literally had no insulation. And what made it worse was that I had to pretend it was warm or else they'd catch on to me, So I'm cold and just yeah, whatever. My G-Star jacket is warm, right? That's how counterfeits work, okay? They look like the real thing sometimes, but they're missing something really important, something substantial about it, right? It may cost you less upfront, but it'll always make you pay another way down the road. And so this is the kind of thing that's going on in our passage, right? Let's look at Satan's counterfeit offer. Matthew 4, 8-10. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you bow down and worship me. Satan was offering Jesus the whole world, right? Jesus could be king of the whole world just like that. And I think it's worth asking, does Jesus even want this, or is this equivalent of me offering Josiah broccoli, right? I'd argue, yes, he does want it, because that's what he came for, right? To bring a new kingdom that restores the brokenness of the world. He wanted to rule in a righteous, humble, loving way. And the most enticing part about all of this is that he could achieve his goal without any kind of sacrifice, without going to the cross, without suffering, without taking on sin. But what it would cost him is his relationship with God, a world that is spiritually lost forever. Because even if he got the surface level goal without dealing, he would get it without dealing with the deeper issues of sin and death, right? So how does this apply to us? I think we get the same offer from Satan every single day, okay? It may not be the whole world. No one's offering you to be king of the world, but it's our deepest desires without the work, without the substance, right? He offers us shortcuts and loopholes and promise of satisfaction. See, our world now, it's full of counterfeit pleasures and promises. It's everywhere you look, right? Perhaps it's the main thing that plagues the common Western person. And so a quick brainstorming would actually point out some actually big ones in our society that's hurting society as a whole, right? And so I'm just gonna list a few. So like obesity and various health problems. Vietnamese people like sugar and salt. That's like strokes and high blood pressure and diabetes, right? It comes from the promise of enjoying the taste and the flavors and experience of food while completely ignoring nutritional values, right? And so we have a big crisis now, right? There's another one is that there's this huge factor of this like weird tension between males and females is, I think a big part of it is a simplified transactional exchange of like sex purely for pleasure while completely ignoring what it's meant for, like reproduction and marital intimacy, right? And that can lead to another one, right? So the crisis of single parenting and divorces, I think is largely due to chasing the thrills and benefits of romance or the stability of having another person and a partner with you without actually committing to each other, without actually wanting to work to struggle through issues together, right? And I can just go on and on and on with this list, right? Debt, addictions, poor mental health, so on, right? Our world is riddled with the promise of pleasure without the purpose and meaning behind them. And it's killing us, right? It's not even killing us individually, it's killing us as a society. And so kudos to Satan, because I think this is a really effective tool, right? I'm like, if I was Satan, I'd give myself a pat on the back and be like, I got them, right? Offering goods that look so appealing on the outside, and yet on the inside leads to death. In the book of James, he gives this really graphic image of what falling to Satan's temptation looks like. And so it's James 1, 14, 15. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And it's this image that compares the counterfeit hope of Satan offers with the hope of a coming baby for two parents, right? Imagine the celebration you throw when you find out you're pregnant. And the joy that you feel when you're looking at the ultrasound progressions and the embryo growing. And you're anticipating the days you get to meet the baby and you're like coming up with names and what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of family you be. And when the day comes, the happiest day of your life comes, you give birth to a stillborn. Death, right? And that's a pretty graphic image. And if it scares you, I think it should. I think James is trying to say it's this serious because Satan's attacking each and every one of us in this way. And I think if we fall victim to it, the results of it are arguably worse than a stillborn baby. I believe the best way to fight against it is awareness, right? Figuring out where and how he's attacking, right? Is it the allure of food and substances? Is it the promise that if you keep up with the trends and the crowd, then you will be satisfied? Is it that black hole that pulls you into like video games and then you wake up 10 years later and you just like miss the best years of your life, right? The hope of counterfeit kingdoms without its true meaning, purpose, and worth will always end in disappointment and pain. And the only way to escape the counterfeit kingdom of Satan is to choose something better, which leads me to my second point. We could choose a costly, lasting kingdom. Okay, so I have this frequent and strange intrusive thought. Intrusive thoughts are those thoughts that just like pop into your head and you're like, no, get out. Like it doesn't make sense, right? And it often happens when I'm driving and I spot a jogger on the side of the road. And you probably think I want to like run them over. No, it's not that, okay. The intrusive thought is this, okay? I wish I can go something like this to them and then sap all of their hours of running, exercise, working out, and just put it on my body, right? And so in my head, what I'm imagining is when I do that, I'm like slowly like, I lose 30 pounds and like my chest and shoulders are huge and like I'm just like super buff and fit. And then they like slowly just morph into some like really gross, unhealthy version of themselves, right? And I'm like, that would be awesome, right? That'd be sick if I had that power. And that's my intrusive thought. I just always think that. Until I realized something, okay? I realized that even if I could do that, okay, let's say I can do that one time, and even if mine and the jogger's body transformed in the way that I imagined, I can almost guarantee you that within a year, I will go back to looking the way I did before, being unhealthy, and they will revert back to being the healthy, athletic jogger that they were. Okay? Because the main difference between me and those consistent joggers you see on the road isn't how we look on the outside. That's just a product of the difference, right? It's actually the inside stuff like lifestyle, resilience, right? Values that influence hundreds of everyday decisions that lead to that healthy body that people want. I think this goes for all things, right? You can probably agree with me if I say there's a huge difference between someone who's intentionally healthy versus someone who simply does, like liposuction and Botox, right? I think there's a huge difference between someone who's a self-made billionaire versus someone who won the lottery, right? You can't even compare the two. And I think for us, there's immense value in doing things right because it shapes you. It shapes who you are on the inside rather than how you look on the outside. And I think you'll end up doing things for greater reasons than just appearance. So Jesus shows us how to choose the right thing. When Satan, he hangs the offer of a counterfeit kingdom in front of Jesus, this is how Jesus answers. Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Jesus chose God's kingdom. And our passage says that he did it in the context of worship, right? And so you might read this and be like, what? What does worship have to do with this whole interaction, right? Because we think of worship as like that music portion we do before someone comes up and talks to you for 20 minutes, right? And it's like, if that's your definition, then were they having like some kind of musical rap battle in the desert? It's like, no, probably not, right? Worship is more than just the music, all right? Worship is something that happens in your everyday life. Worship is something every human does, right? Even if you've never stepped into a church or a temple, you're not religious whatsoever, worship is what you do because worship is the thing that you are about. Worship is the thing that you are devoted to. It's what you put your money towards. It's what you put your time, your effort towards. It's where you find your worth, your fulfillment, your identity in, okay? And so, for example, some people find their worth in their core identity in how they look and how people perceive them, right? And so we can say that they worship beauty and the praise of others, right? Perhaps if they were ancient Greeks, they would worship the goddess Aphrodite because she's the goddess of beauty. When Satan asks Jesus to worship him, he's asking Jesus to worship a life free of pain and full of comfort, right? And the offer was this: Jesus, you can have your kingdom without the suffering, without the rejection. But Jesus chose to worship God and to serve him only, even if it came at the cost of suffering on the cross. And so Jesus chose the right, costly way to be a king. He went to the cross so that he could save us from the real issues of sin and death. And because we can tangibly see his love through his sacrifice, we can know that his love is real and it's true. We can trust him and follow him freely into an abundant life, right? That would be impossible if he took up Satan's offer. Like, we wouldn't never understood or seen what Jesus' kingdom looks like, right? He models for us that high status and power isn't used for oppression or greed, but it is used to be servants, right? And then he invites us to do the same. Following Jesus is going to push you to your limits, and it's going to exhaust you. But it's the only choice that's going to be worth it in the long run. I think one of the hardest things to believe in Christianity, especially when pushed against the backdrop of our current comfort-focused world, is that God genuinely wants what is best for us. And it's like, we're not following Jesus because it's a terrible decision and it leads to nothing. No, we're doing it because it leads to the greatest satisfactions and the greatest security and the greatest relationships. So the joys seen and experienced on earth are but a tiny glimpse of, it's a sneak preview of what we have to look forward to in eternity with God, right? And so the only issue is, it's so easy to ignore the big picture, ignore the eternity side, and just stay fixated on the sneak preview, right? But it's like this. Imagine someone only ever focuses on a trailer of a movie and never watches the movie. It's a little bit sad, right? And you're like, hey, watch the movie. And they're like, no, I like the trailer. And it's just like, feels sad, right? But this is hard. It's so hard to not be fixated because did you know that the average person is exposed up to 10,000 advertisements a day, right? And those are thousands of things that are telling you, that are saying to you, you need me. You need to buy me. I'm going to satisfy you. I'm going to make you happy. I'll make your life better. You need me, right? And there's never been a more tempted generation in the history of the universe. So how in the world do we stay on track with all these things that are pulling for our attention, our love, and our worship? The Tuesday book club I'm a part of is reading this book that tells of two really beautiful stories about fighting temptation, okay? There are stories about two sailors dealing with sirens. And so what sirens were is they're Greek mythical creatures that took on the form of beautiful women, and they sang beautiful songs to lure and seduce sailors toward them so they can eat them or whatever. I don't know what they do with them. The first sailor, he knew that he was going to fail. He knew this was his weakness. He knew that he was weak to girls and the siren song. So what he did was he tied himself up to the ship, and so that when the ship passed the sirens, everything in him wanted to go to the sirens, but he couldn't. He was physically bound. And because of that, he was saved. That's a pretty good strategy, wouldn't you say? Right? Similar to the application of that first point, know your weakness. Where Satan is tempting you and do what you can to prevent it, right? Get yourself locked in a system where you're too occupied to do what's wrong. Or have a group chat that keeps you accountable with your weaknesses. Or even a few people in our church have blocked a bunch of apps on their phone so that we're not wasting hours and hours scrolling meaninglessly, right? I think make and create as many layers of protection and prevention against the temptations that you know you'll fail at. But then there's the story of a second sailor, and his strategy was pretty different, and arguably, I think it's better. He brought with him a legendary musician, so that when the ship passed the sirens, and the sirens sang their beautiful song, there was another sound on the ship. It was a sweeter song. One that drowned out the sirens. See, don't stop at just restraining yourself. That only gets you so far. Capture your heart with the beautiful promises of God. Be moved by his love. Be wowed by what he's doing throughout history and creation. Be captivated by his mission and his will and his kingdom so that you genuinely want to be a part of it, right? Focusing your heart on the sweeter songs of God will make Satan's song sound like that painful, pitchy noise that the speakers sometimes make. You know, it'll hurt you. You'll cringe at it because you know a sweeter sound. And there are a lot of different ways we can hear God's song, right? Maybe it's literally a song, like a worship song. It could be spiritual disciplines like Sabbath or Bible reading. And it might be community or digging into the heavy logical side of apologetics. It all takes work. And it's not easy, but if we can stay on course and choose God's costly kingdom, it will be the most important choice we'll ever make. Let's end with a recap before we start communion. We can choose one of two kingdoms, and that's all our lives will be about, right? An easy counterfeit kingdom, but it'll probably lead to disappointment like my G-Star Raw jacket, right? We can counter the offer by being aware of our temptations and setting up preventative measures. The other option we can choose is a costly, lasting kingdom, and it will be worth it, though hard. And so one way we can get through these hardships is that we focus on God's sweeter song to tune out Satan's counterfeit offers.